For the Village of Lake Bluff Sustainability and Community Enhancement Ad Hoc Committee, today, Monday, July 1st. Roll call.
Certainly. Member Bishop,
Here.
Member Sorensen,
Here.
Member Twitchell,
Here.
Member Johnson,
Here.
Member Patterson.
Here.
Co-Chair Renner is briefly absent, and Co-Chair Perrier.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Perfect. Do I have a consideration of the minutes for the June 3rd meeting? I know I submitted some changes. Glenn, maybe you, were there others?
Well,
I have not, go ahead.
Just Renner wasn't here.
Yeah.
That was
Got that
one.
one.
And then, I'd have to find it somewhere. It said the Botanical Garden and it's Chicago Botanic Garden. I'll find the page for you, Glenn. I'll tell you at the end.
Anything else?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Any other comments?
No. I move to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Botanicals on page 5.
Thank you.
Page 5.
Oh, yeah, you probably did a
Speed
search.
reading.
She did a search for botanical.
All right, I
Very
was
21st century,
gonna be
Emma.
very impressed.
She's a speed reader or.
Good,
Or.
she's good. I still can't find it, but I
Okay,
believe you.
so, any non-agenda items, and visitors present, we have none. And I was really hoping that we would be able to have Brian here by now, because I thought that would take a little longer. So, under general business,
We could,
ooh, that's either somebody
Well, it's clearly
Oh.
somebody.
or yes, it is. Good, because I have to go to a different, do I have to go to a different space?
probably appropriate, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Here it is, hey.
Perfect. Brian.
Perfect
got rid of
timing.
some of the business, so
You're on.
You got rid of some of the business? Okay,
We took care of the minutes.
all right, good. Wasn't here for the last one anyway.
okay, perfect.
Right.
The minutes suggested maybe you were, or maybe you weren't.
I know, I saw that.
We counted you anyway.
Here in spirit.
Yes.
Okay. Glenn's gonna give us an overview of why I'm here.
Sure, so, as you know, Backyard Chicken Pilot Program has had about 3 people come through with an interest in doing it. Only one of those has turned into an actual, established operation so far there, I believe in the West Terrace.
East Terrace.
So East Terrace, yes. And so, Miss Perrier and her neighbor, the McAfee family. McAfee family, have proposed to take advantage of a commercial rent-a-chicken program. So you,
love it.
I'm sure you can explain better than I can, but you can rentthechicken.com
Yeah,
and, get
Yes.
your cluckers.
and you can get your cluckers. So there'll be 4 chickens, and the coop is delivered to our yard. It'll be in Robin's yard. And 4 chickens, all the feed and all the equipment, save for the person that harvests the eggs and cleans out the box. And it'll be delivered as soon as we get approval from the village, and it'll be there till November. And the chickens actually come from Michigan, and they're delivered. I don't know where the hutch comes from, the coop. I'm assuming they bring it with, but the company's actually a Chicago-based company, but the chickens come from Michigan.
So do they just drop it off and then pick it up in November? Or do they do any maintenance in between?
No, but if you, for instance, had a chicken that didn't survive for one reason or another, yes, they will stand by their chickens.
What if it's due to natural
It's
causes?
exceptional, what? Exceptional.
Natural causes.
It's okay, they'll still replace.
Are you able to make the chickens permanent?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
there's an opportunity to do that, but then we'd have to come back before the village and get a long-term permit. But this is sort of to ease into it and find out what the issues may or may not be, and it allows us to travel a bit and have somebody, already on deck to, it's a job sharing. I think it,
Will you move it between the yards, or they're gonna keep it in there?
no, I don't know that it'll be that easy to move. That looks.
Looks a little like luggage, like you can
Yes.
tip it up and
No,
pull it.
I don't think it's gonna be that easy, Sophie, but if it were to be that easy, I don't really have a spot where the chickens could scratch appropriately. But we might move the chickens, they might come into my yard and scratch for a bit, maybe.
A home
They're
visit?
supposed to be, a home visit, exactly. They're supposed to be particularly well-trained with cheese. They like cheese.
So do they stay in there the whole time, or you let them out during the day?
They,
to play around
they'll
in your yard?
probably stay in there a fair amount until we find out what the issues might be locally. I mean, the McAfees have a fence that you cannot see, you can't see in. My fence is very you can see through. So, I don't know what the effect of having like the chickens and dogs walking by, because I have a sidewalk in between my house and the McAfees. So, in order to not stress the chickens, we thought it might be better to start on that side. So, in the McAfee's yard, it's easy to sort of cordon off a place so that they could scratch and walk around.
That's a great idea.
So you get to pick the chickens?
There are, whatever the reds are, that's the breed.
Oh, that's just the one.
Yeah.
Just the
that's-
one.
That's what they find to be the most successful. Now, I was just out in Idaho, and my son has lavender blues, and they're beautiful. I have pictures. And they have the red ones as well, and they're very curious. I mean, it was really kind of fun being with them. I hadn't been around chickens since my youth, when we had dozens. So, I would just say that the process of application, we had, because we live across from the multi-unit, we had to send registered mail to everyone in the multi-unit. And some of them expressed a little disdain for having to go pick up a letter at the post office about chickens. It was like, really, couldn't you have just walked over and asked the question? So just as far as feedback. And then the other thing is that the way the ordinance reads presently, somebody has to come over and inspect the coop. Well, we don't get the coop until we have the permit. They won't deliver a coop, so that's a problem.
But if there was any issues, would they pick up the chickens before November?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, we can say this
It's not
wasn't a
working.
good thing, yeah. It's kind of a nice way to ease into it.
Yeah.
And it might allow other people to just, try it for a summer.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like a dating app for chickens,
Absolutely.
Chicken Tinder.
Yeah, chicken tender.
Tucker?
You've been waiting to say.
All day. That's why he was late. He was working on his comedy shtick.
Chicken tender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Took me a minute.
Any other questions?
Remind me the size of the coop.
The size of the coop is the minimum requirements that is on the ordinance. I did check that, but I think it's 4 feet square per chicken, something like that. Yeah.
It's nice. I could see this for schools and other organizations, and
Yeah.
I think someone was telling me that you could also rent chicks or get the eggs and watch the whole
Right.
hatching process.
And so Robin is a science teacher up in Waukegan, and she is definitely, if this works, she will definitely do the chicks at school as part of her curriculum. And so it could possibly be that these chickens go to get educated in Waukegan,
Nice.
higher education chickens.
Nice.
Now, is this usually the time that they bring them to, or if you?
So ideally, you'd be doing this in April.
Oh, okay.
And thankfully, this year, we didn't do it in April. I mean, it would be wet. It would have been a tough, so it's kind of nice that we are where we are. You rent them by the month.
Okay.
So you
Okay, and you
chose November then? It's
No,
just
they pick them up in November.
That's the
because
latest.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, unless you buy them, and
Okay.
you can buy the whole enchilada as such as it is. Yeah.
How
but
much is it a month? You don't know.
It's like $100 or something, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I think for the season, it was like 400 and something. So, the cost per egg is probably out of most people's.
Don't calculate, don't
Yeah.
calculate the cost. per-
Exactly.
This is a way just to see if you want to invest in the long
Exactly,
term. So it's
exactly.
good.
And what might be issues. So, I think it'd be fun.
Excellent.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, can I get a roll call, please?
Just one moment. All right, Member Bishop,
Yes?
Member Sorensen,
Yes.
Member Twitchell,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Patterson,
Yes.
Co-Chair Renner,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Let us know how it goes.
Forward to hearing back. We'll get field reports every month, right?
You absolutely will. And, our neighbors were thrilled at the concept. So,
That's fun.
I think it's really great, especially for people with kids, and you're like, well, let's see how you do and see how you take care of them.
yep.
I think your neighbors are envisioning little baskets of eggs
I
being
think
delivered.
Can't do that. That was part of the discussion.
Oh,
No
really?
s- Oh, no
You can't sell them, but you can donate them. You can give them
Yes.
away.
You know where we live.
What? You know where we live.
Okay. Up next.
Sure, so relatively brisk meeting tonight and just a few updates to share, a couple things to talk through, and we'll be on out of here. So the first is, again, the village board passed the sustainability plan late last month, so we're very excited about that. There were 4 priority areas the SEC recommended, and one we added that we thought was fairly obvious, the stormwater one. But so again, invasive species, we're still working with Lobola on what that partnership looks like. We still have some landscape design proposal in the hopper. Nothing to report there. Light pollution, we're talking about a bit tonight. Stormwater, we're still awaiting the results of the survey that happened late last year, early this year, to come back a little later this summer. Bicycle parking, and then general outreach on sustainability. Again, that outreach topic on our agenda tonight. So I want to make sure we all saw these and are kind of thinking in this framework, and also thinking a little bit what comes after this, perhaps. But these are the goals that went to the village board, and no negative comments.
Were there any comments?
There were not. It was a relatively long meeting. I think it probably gone about 2.5 hours all in by that point, between the finance committee for an hour.
Well,
and
that
the
might be
board for an
good.
hour. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, but I mean, privately before the meeting, you hear comments, you have these discussions. I think it was all very positive. So with that said, a couple points we'll talk about tonight, start to tee up as we get into the summer. The first, I think I hope the memo conveys well, is something as staff we've struggled with a little bit, is this is an outreach focused committee, and there are a lot of things that we've talked about doing outreach around, and we're really trying to narrow that into an actionable set make sure we have some clear expectations of what you're looking for from us and vice versa. And so we've tried to put together this, just this list of right about 20, in this case, it actually came out of 23 messages to focus on through the end of the year. So these are in part drawn from the what can you do steps in the sustainability plan. Some of them, to be transparent, are drawn from the work of some excellent interns down in Highland Park who have kind of blazed the trail for us on this. Some courtesy of John Scoboletti and so on. I just want to acknowledge those contributions. But again, we present this for your feedback, and we want to take some time to see if this matches where we think our priorities are at the moment.
Really quick, under the bicycle pedestrian transportation, when I first looked at that, I kind of assumed that one of the key bullets was going to be, you're cutting down on your car usage or switching to a different kind of vehicle, or just simply like bicycling or walking more places. So I think adding that one in there would be important, just because it seems obvious, and the other two kind of go in tandem with that.
Okay?
The only thing I could, and I could have more comments, but on the switch to LED lighting bulbs, we could also add in use of lighting controls, automatic lighting controls.
I'm going to suggest in natural resources, consider a pollinator garden, but as much as that is, consider not spraying for insects. And I'll
It
expand
is, well, well, maybe we could say, add in 14, after herbicides, include pesticides.
pesticides, natural or otherwise.
You could also add in, just with that, switching to integrated pest management, because if people look that up, there are a lot of great resources that'll explain the
But
term.
I think it makes people glaze over, and they don't look it up,
Yeah.
and then they don't know what it means, even though it's great.
I just get a surge of fear whenever I hear the term. Back in res life, that was code for, oh no, there are bed bugs.
Oh, God. It makes me itch.
And like, we're in the process of doing some gardening and stuff, some different things in our yard. We're switching over with more sun and stuff, and I see that a lot, native plants, and, but I think it would be nice if we could do a link to that nice list that we got, so that people are like, because not everybody knows
What they can use.
what they can use and what the best thing in this area, and that was a really nice list that they had come up with, so whether we could do the link or.
The other thing that's helpful, I don't know if there's, is to give people examples of what it looks like. So if there's,
True. Pictures.
I don't know, some of the stuff at the beach, or like, I don't know, to give people ideas.
Or even just like including a picture of what a native lawn looks like and showing people that it can also be, a beautiful lawn. Because I feel like a lot of times people look at the natives and assume that you're just letting weeds grow everywhere.
Yeah.
It does look like that at
Well,
my
but
house
you can
sometimes.
Apply for
The
the
dandelions.
designation from Lake County. Conserve
Open-
Lake
open-
County?
Yeah, but it's open lands
Is it
now.
open lands?
Mhm.
Okay.
So as far as this communications plan, these are some of the bullets, and we're gonna look at various ways to get that out there, right?
Well, it depends on what, how we want to structure our interactions a bit, I guess. So
Yeah.
at one end, it could be, here's the list, and so, at the staff level, we'll take these 23 items, we've got 28 weeks, and we'll probably more or less focus on getting one a week-ish out there, and probably a social media-oriented kind of campaign, a little bit of work in the Village e-newsletter, and
Yeah.
they'll kind of be, that'll really probably be the focus. I think those are the most straightforward things to try and build a foundation from.
Glenn, is there a reason that we're, is this in priority?
No.
Or was it, should we be alphabetical just so that,
Well, this isn't necessarily
is
our
internal.
priorities, this is just a communications plan for the public.
right,
Yeah, they were just numbered for ease of reference. They're not presented in any particular order.
So that can be mixed up and rolled out,
Yeah, as we,
seasonally,
Logically.
Okay.
Yes.
seasonally
Got it.
appropriate, there are some things that bubble up to the top where,
Yeah.
yeah, right now.
Okay.
I think one of the things we need to do is get everybody in the community who is online hooked up to our newsletter. Because I have so many friends where I'll mention something and they'll say, oh, I didn't get that, I don't know about that. And I'll say, well, that was in the Friday newsletter. But they're like, oh, I'm not part of that. So if we could get more people involved in that.
I even get that.
those are, I'll be honest with you, I
Emailed
haven't
to
seen the
you.
website lately.
I don't think I do.
It's, it is an area we could
I was
certainly
looking at it
improve
today,
on.
and there were definitely, because I looked at Lake Forest and I looked at ours, and there were a lot of things that I think we
Yeah,
could.
I'm just wondering if
add on
like,
there.
on the front page, if we could at least have a little tiny box that says
Like some
Lake
sort of
Bluff
guide.
Sustainability, and then you click right on the front
Because
page.
we have a
Yeah.
committee, whereas other communities don't.
Right.
So,
That is a good selling point, for one, and we have, at this point, accumulated a lot of resources that we should
Start on
make available, and our answer, if we can avoid giving the answer saying, okay, you'll just have to look that up, through our website, it's a long path to get to that information.
So maybe we could have like, I don't know, 20 minutes or 15 minutes in a future meeting where we bring up like a hypothetical page and talk about how we'd like it to be organized for easy to get to points.
Okay.
And we could think of the links too that we want to add in
Right,
there, because they have
exactly.
links for residents, but not all the ones that we
No,
have had are
right,
on
for
there,
sure.
so it'd be nice to
Some-
kind of
Right.
add those, or
good
maybe just have those
priorities.
on the sustainability box link.
Sure.
Glenn incorporated a lot of the important links in the plan,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But the photos from around the community, we could have things
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
submitted. I mean, eventually, we could probably even have videos, maybe a link to a YouTube committee channel with things that people could watch.
Are you saying that we should have, I'm confused, that we should have a box somewhere on what site that
the
people
landing
can-
site for the
Right, when you go to
village.
Village of Lake Bluff and they've got all this stuff, somewhere on
Right.
there's a green box that says Lake Bluff's, Sustainable Lake Bluff, and it's green and
Okay.
it's flashing.
Right,
LED
neon,
lights.
LED lights. But I do think, to your point, Leslie, that having a drive for emails is a lovely thing, because if you're gonna put your name in the hopper, you're presumably gonna read it.
But you also get other information every week, and it's fantastic. You know what's going on in your community.
Yes, we could have a sign up on Fridays at the farmer's market.
We could do that, couldn't we? That would be a very good
Off-site.
idea.
Offsite of the farmer's market. We're not allowed on the property. You'll talk to the village board about that.
I bet we could if we had something specific.
Just saying.
I know.
Oh, that would be good.
Be at the Green Lines table every other week. Slide it in.
It should be said, good for them for tabling every week. I mean, they seemed very committed to it when I've gone on by, so
Yeah.
power to them.
No, it's good.
Maybe they'd share their list if they're local. That would be a simple. way to
Well, we
get-
gotta be careful. I prefer to have people link and then sign up for newsletters rather than commingling a private and government
Okay.
organization.
That is a problem.
That's a valid point.
And I think sometimes when people say that, you can kind of help them too, because my husband was like, well, I don't know about that. So I signed him up, and I signed up a couple friends, because they, didn't want to deal with it. So sometimes it's easier just to go, if you want it, help them.
And I find it really useful,
I do too.
know what's
Always
going
read it.
on, and you always get a little, Carol always puts some little tidbit in that, about certain things, and you're like, oh, really, that's good, And why not have something about sustainability every week? Wouldn't hurt.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I think some good ideas to make sure generally this list we have some comfort with. Okay, great. So, the last, maybe meatier item to talk about this evening, as we start to get some gears rolling, dark sky ordinances. So we've talked about this from time to time. We had a great presentation, from one of your
Katie.
coworkers. Yeah, Katie. That really looks at sort of the architectural pieces of it, at how you do it, at how it's built, at what matters. We wanted to start to talk a little bit about the regulatory side of things and start to build that framework. So we gave you some samples from the Village of Homer Glen. So they're distinguished for being, I think, the only dark sky certified community in Chicagoland. They also happen to have a relatively simple ordinance. I mean, it's still technical in nature, but you can probably read it and you can probably follow along with what's going on, even if you're not technically minded. So as we're thinking about what this is, how it looks, I wanted to talk through a few of the principles, again, from a regulatory perspective, and maybe a few of the decision points that we'll have to work through.
Glenn, does the current ordinance reflect any preference for minimizing light pollution?
It does not.
Okay, so it's silent.
Essentially silent.
Okay.
Yeah, so as far as regulation right now, in theory, if there was obnoxious lighting, at some point it becomes a public nuisance, the same as most obnoxious things. Your architectural board of review will look at lighting, and so they won't necessarily try to keep it to a fixed level, but they'll look at photometric plans and they'll apply, professional judgment. That's about it.
Okay.
So, thinking about how you would structure an ordinance to work in that framework, certainly a few goals. One is, of course, to use the least amount of light necessary. So that can be in the form of just making sure we're not overlighting places. That's going to be one of the bigger friction points probably. So Homer Glen just uses a net amount of lumens per acre, which upside's very simple, very easy to calculate. You don't need a survey. You don't really need a whole lot of, you don't need to know much to know how much light you have to work with from a fixture perspective. But it's a relatively blunt tool, right? The International Dark Sky, the model ordinance, suggests you can do it based on per parking space. Again, relatively simple. Tends to punish people that have less parking, which may be beneficial in our community. You can also do per square foot of hard space. That's relatively well aligned, but then you need a survey to know how much hardscape you have generally. And so you're getting into some more friction from a development perspective. And then if you look at the dais, I printed out a few of these tables for you from the model ordinance. It's this little book here. So if you flip a few pages in, we're going to go to, didn't hand this one out. I handed out too many of this one, I apologize. We're going to go to page 2930, so the second page of the packet. And you'll see there's even a performance method, which is, again, very tailored, but very somewhat complicated, where it says you have so many lights per square foot base, and then if you have entrances, you get some lights for your entrances. If you have facade, you get this much lighting for your facade, and so on. And so you can really get into the nitty-gritty of controlling these things.
But that was an optional calculation. They allowed
Optional
both.
calculation too. Should be mentioned, that's an alternative path in the model ordinance. So the model says you can do per parking space or per square foot of hard space, or the performance-based calculation. And presumably people would pick whichever one treats them the most generously.
Do we have any idea how our industrial park fits into this?
We have
The
not
people
even,
that are there now?
not even started that calculation yet, or analysis, I guess you would say.
Well, the model lighting ordinance covers industrial, commercial districts. It has a lighting zone for that.
I just wondered how they're
Whether they
fitting
fit or
into
not.
the, what we're hoping for.
I mean,
Are we
Glenn may
close?
disagree with me, but I would assume that we would cover all areas of the village. The sensitivity we have to both residents and businesses, which are good for the village, is, and they mentioned that these ordinances is just a long-term transition plan. This is not gonna be, you're non-conforming, rip them out in the next year or two kind of thing. And they talk about it in both these ordinances, if you're gonna replace a whole pole, if it's been so many years, if you're building a new lot, And I think that none of these things would be a hardship on those businesses to do that as over the years as they transition. And all the light fixtures eventually get replaced. And we do it all the time in my business where it's like, okay, it's time to replace that fixture, it's old. You just have to get the right type of fixture. You might not get the whole parking lot down lighting, but if you choose the right type of fixture, it can make a huge difference.
I was just wondering how we fit in now and how close are we to what we want in that area? I've not been out there at night,
I would
really.
expect we're not very close.
Yeah, some of them look, they're pretty bright.
I know that the light that's 2 blocks away from me in my bedroom, it's yellow and beautiful.
Well, like,
Mine
All
too.
night long.
well, the Target development was all done to lead lighting, so you can tell that, but the car dealers and some of the others, no.
That's what I was wondering, how close we are.
No, not in the dealers, not at all.
When we start to get into fixed numbers, many of these developments have done recent projects. They'll have photometric plans on file. We just haven't started to
Take a look.
put that all together quite yet.
And we don't know how we are as a village for our street lighting, right? Whether we,
No.
Although some of the ComEd fixtures that they replaced in like the train lot and some of the other areas that I've seen are better than what we used to have. The LED lights, they're more cut off.
I mean, the upside is, you know, how well are they shielded? How well the light temperatures, things like that are hard to say. I would say just as an outsider, the village has about as few streetlights as you see in a suburban area.
It's pretty dark.
So we're off to a pretty good start, I would think. So that one big, maybe frictional area. Another part of using the least light necessary, pretty easy. Hours of operation. At some point you go dimmer. At some point you start to use activity-based
motion
mechanisms, motion sensors. You heard all about that from Katie and Brian before. They're much more experts at that subject than I am.
And the energy codes in Illinois now are requiring the reduction after hours, so,
Yeah.
except in places of security concerns or whatever.
So preventing sky glow, another component of this, 2 ways. One, we require shielding, so especially past a certain lumen output. Again, these concepts you probably remember fairly well. And then restricting uplighting, so only allowing so many lumens to be angled at such an angle, trying to reduce the amount that those can go directly into the sky by missing or can reflect off. And we also are concerned not just vertically, but horizontally. A lot of these have an emphasis on making sure light doesn't bleed too far over the lot line or the property line. So again, that's the situation of requiring shielding. I think we had a good understanding of this from Katie's presentation, but again, as a reminder, bug standards, backlight, uplight, glare. So glare being these relatively horizontal elements that'll shine right at you. Backlight being behind the fixture, tends to go over the property line. Uplight being really just wasted energy, just going straight into the sky. One thing I would mention, again, as we're thinking about how you regulate these things, some ordinances try to get into these bug ratings directly and talk about how much you can have of each category. And for most professional applications, you'll have what you'll need to evaluate that. For a lot of residential, small commercial, things like that, oftentimes they'll be using fixtures that may not have these published or may not have these easily accessible, and it gets harder to manage that. Now, often those are relatively wasteful fixtures. Some people would say those are the ones we should be trying to keep out, but something to think about. And again, I think something we're all fairly familiar with, fully shielded fixtures, keep light from going above 90 degrees, directed in a relatively narrow pool downwards. Plenty of examples, parking lights, wall packs, everything in between. Canopies sometimes can be recognized as accomplishing the same effect. And then the last couple points. One, I left off this slide, light temperature, starting to become into vogue to look at and pay attention to.
Yeah.
Commercial versus residential. Oftentimes people will focus primarily on commercial applications because residential is kind of wild, wild west. Oftentimes, you know, a homeowner will not get a building permit to put a fixture on the outside of their house. It's relatively normal. I can't tell you if it's strictly legal, but it happens. Certainly, they replace bulbs without building permits and things like that, and so how precise you want to get into that world, probably the biggest friction point in our community you would have. And the last one, I think Brian touched on pretty well. When do you come into compliance? What's the road to that? When are you, when is it time to upgrade fixtures? Both from a performance standpoint, how long can we expect this to take? And then also mechanically, when do we have to push people into making that last extra investment and coming all the way into spec? So, if there's any questions about this, about the Homer Glen code we gave you, happy to talk about those. If not,
Did the Homer Glen one reference at all, residential stuff where they're lighting, sort of their landscaping or their trees, or like it's just purely aesthetic?
it gets
As
into
opposed to
uplighting.
safety.
Yeah, so it does get into uplighting. By and large, I would say Homer Glen's code, is really focused away from, go to my packet here, from residential, I think for some of the reasons we talked about. But if you go to, it's labeled page 4 at the top, that's applicable in every district. So that talks about landscape lighting, angle and lumens, architectural lighting, angle and lumens, flags, signs. They're at the top of the page. And again, kind of the perks of these, you can look at it, you can know what you're looking at, you can know if it's in compliance or not. You don't need an engineer to help you evaluate that.
One of the things I'd like to look at with you, and I'm gonna get some of my people on my staff to look at it too, is that I like the way the model lighting ordinance is written from, this kind of jumps right into it, and I think this does a nice job of stepping you through and talking about the zones and what's a park and what's a residence and what's a business district. And we can, this is all fair use, we can extract this text out of this PDF, look at this, and then maybe take some of the better parts of this. I'm asking, reached out to some of the IAS people in the committee to ask them, it's been 2011. Are they working on a draft? Have they got something, that they've seen that's been more updated? This is all great. I mean, we don't have anything, and this would take us to the next level, but I'm just trying to see if there's some energy codes that have changed. Like they talk about setback requirements it's more extensive setback requirements with the current Illinois Energy Code than are even in this model lighting ordinance. So we can extract that text out, start to paste some of this in, and then just kind of work on it bit by bit by bit, and then maybe take portions of that for these meetings here and say, okay, we're just gonna talk about this section tonight over the next couple months. Do we all agree on this section, and then move from, residential to landscaping to commercial and just talk about that?
Sounds like a plan.
Good.
I'm curious too about if there's any knowledge of how Homer Glen might have worked with its community, both commercial and otherwise, to have this conversation, whether it's rolling it out or leading up to it, going forward. Do we have any feedback or knowledge of that?
Have not gone down that road yet, but happy to give them a call. We'll see. Perhaps maybe they'll be interested in, see if we can get a presentation out of them. I'm sure that some they'll love to talk about.
Okay.
And, where have their resistance points been?
Bannockburn had one many years ago too, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they've updated theirs.
When Drew was there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some larger cities as well, I know in Arizona in particular, that follow the dark sky plan, metropolitan areas. So that might be nice to be able to use as an exhibit. People survive this way and thrive, actually.
Yes. As a general community in the residential areas, I think we're not too bad. I
Right.
mean, I've been in plenty of other towns where you can't see anything, and off my driveway, I can get a pretty good view of the stars. But
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. We will work to bring you something back at our next meeting. So,
Village staff report?
yeah, a couple other items here at the dais for you. Again, quick hits. So one, you'll remember one of the goals in the sustainability plan says to look at community solar. So we've had kind of an interesting opportunity with that come up just recently. There's a memo from the village's finance committee at your spot at the dais. So we're probably going to be one of the first of about 6 or 7 communities that'll be bought into the first community solar project, period, in the state of Illinois, which is pretty exciting.
That's awesome.
It's, I think it's a 1.2 megawatt facility down in Elgin on the roof of a warehouse. So most of these aren't gonna be coming online for about another year. The Elgin one's first in, and for economic reasons, it makes a lot of sense for us as the village to be one of their customers.
Okay.
So, great story to tell in that, one, we get to support alternative energy in the state of Illinois. 2, we're one of the first, and 3, it's gonna save us an okay amount of money too. So the way these are priced for us, example on the screen, essentially we're gonna buy 100% and we're gonna pay for 90% of it. So we turn around, we pay 90% to the solar provider for the credits. ComEd gives us, 100% credit. Because the facility is relatively small, I mean, all of our facilities would take up about a third of it, and it needs to get split 8 ways. It won't go super far, but chances are Village Hall and Public Works will be accounted for by the deal we're looking at, depending on how many and what accounts finally come in.
So this is gonna be built in various locations and these communities participate, or I'm trying to understand?
Yeah, so as far as the whole community solar program, it was a tax credit funded initiative from the Illinois Power Agency,
Okay,
Illinois Energy Agency, one of 2. But it's, it's more or less a donut around Chicago, only
Sure.
it's some downstate. As
So-
far as this particular plant, it is one facility in Elgin. There are, it's mostly North Shore communities that are
Correct.
buying into it.
so there will be other facilities built around Illinois that can provide power. So Elgin's one of the first they're gonna build, right?
Yeah.
They might build one in Schaumburg, they might build one in here, and we'll build, okay.
Yep.
Did they come to us, or did we go to them?
Little column A, little column B. So, again, because municipalities are attractive for a lot of economic reasons, I can go into if you like, all of these players are seeking them out. Through our work with the North Shore Electricity Aggregation Group once upon a time, we have a very well-qualified consultant who used to be with the Power Agency, who's been working on a lot of different sides of this. And so that's how we learned about the opportunity.
So is there any chance we could build a solar plant in Lake Bluff?
So generally speaking, at least in the short term, no. I think all of
They've
these.
picked their locations?
Yeah, all the lotteries have gone on and
Okay.
they've picked their locations and so on.
Like the top of the Target building, as a for instance?
Or even Jawa?
Oh, that one.
I mean, but you're saying there was a lottery for cities or towns to get these built in?
More, a few different threads. So more, to enter the lottery, you had to have these development plans and you had to show viability, and so they basically had to have everything on contract.
Okay,
And then as a practical matter, here in Lake Bluff, we have very expensive land compared to most of the places you can build on ComEd's grid in
Sure.
Chicagoland.
That's changing.
But there are some plans in the work elsewhere in Lake County. So Lake County has had a big RFP that's been trying to market sites. Still remains to be seen how those projects will turn out.
okay.
Okay.
Nice,
Cool.
very nice.
So when we have any kind of contract, we'll let you know. That's exciting.
Yeah,
And then one more for public information. If you grab this on the dais, this is from the Lake County Stormwater Management Commission. They're doing some work with the Lake Michigan watershed right now, so this is their draft list of goals. I don't think anything in here too groundbreaking or too controversial, but I think a thoughtful plan, a well put together one. So you're welcome to look at it. If you have any comments, we're happy to facilitate those being submitted to the public record of Lake County.
So Lake Bluff has to submit a plan to fit into this overarching plan?
Lake County essentially does it for the Lake Michigan watershed on behalf of us and others. I believe we partially fund their efforts through this, but it's an interagency plan. So there's one for Lake Michigan, there's one for this branch of the Chicago River, and so on.
All right, member reports, anyone want to bring up items that they found recently or share?
I do.
Okay.
So Friday, I was at home oddly, but a gentleman knocked on my door and told me that he was informing me that some of my neighbors were going to be spraying for bugs. And his company name, I don't know whether I say it or not, but I haven't been able to actually find one that matches his hat logo. So I asked him about the product that he was using and who was in fact signed up for this on my street. And he said, well, legally I have to tell you that this is going on. And he gave me a couple of names, which I have not found. I have not gone to them yet, just because the first time they weren't home. But in a nutshell, it is a company that uses chrysanthemums to spray, and that is a pyrethrum, and he feels that these are not harmful to the environment. And the actual answer is, it's very toxic to fish and to bees, wipes them out almost instantaneously.
Wow.
So I think that this is one of those places, and I've got, thank you to Sophie, I have some information, and I think this needs to get out to the public, and this is certainly something that the Enviro Club should be all over.
Yeah, we did a lot of pesticides work this year.
Yeah,
so.
but just the education that needs to continue, that there is no such thing as spraying and not affecting everything.
So Green Minds was able to get a moratorium on a spray that was supposed to be conducted at the high school with Roundup. So
Oh, my God.
I would reach out. We still, yeah,
That's definitely what you should use around kids.
yeah. So they would be a good resource to reach out to,
Yeah.
just because they did a really good job with stepping in and helping us with that.
And I can't tell whether or not this was actually somebody that was trying to get a collection of people on a block, and that this was, I know there's a guy that walks at the beginning of the season, he's
I
very
recall
tall and
that.
thin, and he's trying to sign people up. This was not that guy. And I don't know, they didn't have any sort of tag from the village, which was also, to go door to door, don't you need a tag?
If you were soliciting commercial products, if you're trying to sell something,
I
you would.
can't tell if he
Yeah.
was or he wasn't. I mean, you know, he didn't say, would you be interested because you're neighbors? I just need to tell you that I'm spraying, and there's no harm to anyone. And I'm like, well, then why are you knocking on my door?
Right.
So that's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any way to also control the number of people that get licenses or permits to,
Yeah. So there's, at this point, there's no licensing process, permitting process for that at all.
why wouldn't we? Or could we?
I'd have to look into the question, to be honest with you. Chances are we could. I mean, I know that the state licenses pesticide applications, or applicators. There we go. So
Because they have to
I don't
go
know if
through a
we're-
training
yeah.
yeah.
So usually when that kind of thing is in place, we may be preempted from regulating them further. It just depends.
Yeah, well, minimally, I have some good intel here, both from Lake County and from the Washington Post Climate and Environment and the National Pesticide Information Center, all of which could be linked on our,
What time of day was it?
like 3 in the afternoon on a Friday.
Yeah, because it's really specific, like when best times of day, which are later, you know, when bees aren't active and you don't want to spray on.
Well, I have not seen the guy
Flowers
spraying,
and, you know,
I mean, he
yeah.
didn't spray that day.
Okay.
He was just informing me
He was
that over
doing
the
that.
next few days. It's also 4th of July weekend, like when are people gonna be in their backyard? And our fish and now my chickens, frankly.
I don't know if you live on the parade route or not, but if they're spraying in their front lawn, you probably don't want people sitting anywhere near that.
Yeah, I think we've talked about the idea of, and I like the idea of licensing landscapers, and we could look into that in terms of pesticide and whatever, and there may be ways, I think it's gonna be one of the trickier things, but we're gonna have to tackle it as an SEC, is how we regulate those kind of chemicals. And it may be, there's some communities that ban certain ones, maybe some are on the least worst list, and, there may be ways that if we don't, we either regulate it, ban it, or we implement fees so that it becomes cost prohibitive, or it becomes a carrot for companies to do the right thing.
So, this past weekend, my daughter was up in Wisconsin with her dog, and they were training. And it was odd that there were no mosquitoes. There was nothing but moisture. They were near a big lake. And, so she said, what do you do? You've got my dog. What do you do? How do you prevent this? And he said, mouthwash and Dawn. You can look it up on the internet. And they don't like the smell. It doesn't hurt them. Anyways, just sprayed in the grass.
It's interesting. It would be interesting to know, when you talk to the people, if you can, on your block,
Believe me,
to find out what they're afraid of, why are they spraying?
sure.
And in our community, to be able to address that for people.
And-
Well, I
To
mean,
get down to why are we
keep
doing
in
this?
mind that Health Department sent out a press release today that West Nile was found in mosquitoes in Highland Park. So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
Yes, but to the point of the Lake County, even their notation, the 4 Ds of defense.
Yes.
Drain standing water, defend when outdoors, use a repellent that's safe, eucalyptus, et cetera. Dawn to dusk, protect yourself all day and night, and wear repellent outdoors. And long sleeves and pants help a lot, so,
And the spray that happens in your yard is not long-term.
No.
It wears off. You
ends
do
up
it
in the
for a
waterway.
party.
yeah.
It
So
seems
what's
like it's
the
gotten
larger
more and
purpose
more
for that?
prevalent.
Exactly.
I've seen a lot of
There's a
them
lot
out
of
in the
mosquito
last.
Yeah.
bans
Yeah.
around. A lot of
Yes,
people
and
doing
they're
it
all
like
new.
a normal maintenance now, yeah. A lot of-
And the birds are just finishing up their nesting. I mean, I had a little wren, she's going out and getting moths and stuff like that, and then I go, oh, there goes the food source, and poisoning her babies.
Yeah.
And our fish in our lake,
And your
And our
chickens,
children.
and my
And
chickens.
chickens.
Forget my
Your pets.
chickens, yeah.
because they're gonna be
Pets.
eating the bugs that are
Yeah.
poisoned in your yard.
Yeah, because I've had a bug control guy come, well, different people, and they're all from the same company, and they're very aggressive, and it's, they want to do it right now, and they'll give you a really good deal, and it's hard to know, like, if they're legitimate, like, they know the last name of the people who used to live there. Oh, we did work for her, and then, they say all the names of the people in
They
the
do.
neighborhood.
We're throwing out
When they say
names.
bugs, is it specifically mosquitoes? I mean, what's the
He
issue?
didn't
this
say,
was a
he
whole
said
pest
that they
control
were,
thing, but-
yeah.
Yeah,
He
yours
said they
is
were
different.
spraying trees, and I'm like, what's the
What?
problem with the trees?
What?
That's weird.
Especially white oaks have, 100 different species of bugs?
500.
500 different species of bugs that live on or about a white oak, and that's a huge food source.
Did he mention if it was like a broad spectrum insecticide?
He said it was good for the environment, it was made from chrysanthemums, and I said, you haven't done
No.
your research.
Good.
Oh, it's not good.
Anyways, it's education,
Yes, it is.
so.
Right, I had a chance, I didn't get a chance to go in person, but I had a chance, it's on YouTube now, the League of Women Voters, about rainstorms and flooding. It's an hour and a half, it is a little long, but if you have a chance, you can go on YouTube and watch it. Some takeaways that I did, they had, not Village Lake Bluff, but they had the consultant, the civil engineer, what's his name?
I forget his name, but with Christopher Berg.
Christopher Burke, right, the firm. We should share that presentation. What was interesting is that he started to present some of the information from the surveys. So they actually created heat maps around Lake Bluff, so you could see where the floods are being reported, on which streets and where those areas are. They talked about, which we should probably have a discussion on, the sewer, or stormwater and sewer upgrades that are being done, particularly in the terraces, right, this summer. There's one on Lincoln, there's one in the North Terrace, there's work in the East Terrace. I think some takeaways that came from that, which we already know, which was the rainstorms are increasing in Lake County. They showed that the charts with both the intensity and amount of rainfall, and you can just see from the 1900s, it's just going up. What was a 100-year storm event has been changed. It's now 32% more, larger, to qualify for a 100-year event. They talked about the fact that a lot of the storm systems in cities and towns and the roads and bridges were really designed to maybe a 10 or 25-year event. So one of the the City of Lake Forest engineer got up and said, one of the questions he goes, why don't we just fix all the storm sewers? They did an actual construction cost estimate, and they said it would cost each homeowner $80,000 to replace every single storm system in the City of Lake Forest to accommodate a 100-year storm event. So,
That's not gonna happen.
There's your takeaway.
but I think some nice things about the Village of Lake Bluff is that we've got some areas we know we have to work on. We're a smaller town. It's still expensive, but I know that those projects are going on. It might be nice to get a briefing on what's being done. I don't know what the current update on the long-term study for the viaduct flooding. I know there was this huge pipe they were talking about sending out to Lake Michigan to erode our ravines, so I don't know where that's at. I know it's just being studied. It's probably still further, right?
I don't know that there's an active study on that underway. I mean, there's some discussion in the big picture stormwater study, but,
Okay.
We spent, back in 2014 or so, we spent some effort studying that problem, and all the answers were either 8-figure projects
Right.
or unlikely to be permitted by either the Corps of Engineers or Stormwater Management. It's a real tricky situation.
When I was on the board, we looked at detention in that wooded property up in the East Terrace, and then that went away, and then it was the Army Corps or state or someone got involved and said, no, we want to build this lay down the super pipe.
I believe that was.
Lake Bluff's big tunnel,
Yeah, deep tunnel.
deep tunnel.
Water slide.
You want Mescal just to come on in?
Do we know how many people, or the percentage of people that responded to our survey? Because I know over and over again, there was a request to please fill it out. Do we know the response we got in?
I know we were pleased with it. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of, it's been a while since I've looked at it, 550 or so responses.
Of home, so that, we have enough to really get a good idea of
We're pretty confident,
where the
yeah.
problems are.
And that was really, probably the last push was that postcard we got in the mail. We got a couple hundred out of that, so.
They did, as Brian pointed out, they did talk about that pretty early in the presentation.
Yeah.
So the number, 500 or so people, isn't that high, but when they showed the map, it looked really fairly representative from what we've been hearing of, with neighbors and some of the conversations that we've had in here. And it was really quite granular. It gets down to like backyards, and it's a very good map. So if you have an opportunity, take a look for that.
Interesting, in our neighborhood, we were having a lot of flooding in our backyards. And there was a new house being constructed, so we came to the engineer. He came out, we all got together as neighbors, and we had the person who's building the home put in a French drain, a large one, but they were able then to hook it up to another French drain with a neighbor. So it's made a huge difference in our whole half block. It's just amazing, the difference. We would always have white water running through our backyard, and waves. And now it's just normal storm water. So, just having people communicate with the village, I think is important, getting that word out. You can make a difference in your property if you communicate.
Well, one of the things, we've just had, May was the wettest month on record in Illinois, this May.
Oh, yeah.
And the second wettest May was last May.
Yeah.
So the ground is so saturated right now that we get a good rain and it's immediately on the surface. It's not going anywhere. And I know I diverted some water from some trouble areas out to the front of my lawn, but because I'm on a slope, the water is rushing down the lawn and I've had some erosion around my trees. So I'm trying to do plantings of vinca and try and build up an erosion control planting thing. So I mean,
Needs-
non-native species.
I know,
I
there's
was
some
just gonna
others that
say.
are gonna do more for you than Vinca.
it was listed.
I can't believe you went there. After serving on this group with this group for so long. Nice,
A
nice.
sustainable ground cover.
No. Maybe Liriope would have been better.
I mean, it's gotta take a waterfall. It's gotta.
Yeah, and then you need some natives.
I'll listen. You
We've
got it.
made our point.
Send me a list, because some of them have washed away.
That's amazing.
That's unfortunate. Okay, so Emma, did you find out? Is this it?
I have one more.
Okay,
One more meeting.
that's awesome.
So I'll be
But
here
you
in
have
August.
3 choices for us.
Oh, yes. I have 3 enthusiastic choices.
Lottery?
Yes.
Awesome.
Great. Anything else? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hands ready to go.
Very good.
Okay.